Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Standards Committee for the new municipal year. The first item on the agenda is election of chairman. Is there a nomination, please?
You're asking for a nomination for chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't hear that bit. That was me. I would like to nominate Morag Malvern, please.
And is there a seconder?
Chris Johnson, seconded.
And are there any other nominations? Okay, can we just have a quick show of hands for Councillor Malvern? All those in favour? Okay, that's a majority. So if you'd like to join me up here, Councillor Malvern, as chairman.
Thank you. Well, the next item, I think, is the appointment of vice chairman. So can I have any nominations, please?
Yes, I would like to nominate Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
And is that seconded? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other nominations? Could we have a quick show of hands then, please, for Councillor Debay?
Yep.
And that's carried. Thank you. And do we have any apologies, please?
Apologies from Councillor John Kaiser.
So then we move to the minutes from the last meeting, which I think we just confirmed these. And that's carried. Thank you. I don't know if members have had the opportunity to read through them all, but if you're happy they're a correct record. I was going to say, I think we're all fairly.
I think I'm the only one that was at this meeting.
Yes. Well, no pressure then, but
They look all right to me. Okay.
Sounds good. We can move it on. That's fine. Thank you. So the next item is, do I have any declarations of interest? No, that's good. Thank you. And then public question time.
So we have a question from Tony Johnson, who's here, Chairman.
Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Johnson, can I ask you to put your question, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Information published as regards the outcome of the public consultation on the election cycle appears to be inadequate for member and public understanding, 2 days and half a day respectively, inconsistent with rules 327 and 328 of WBC's constitution, inconsistent with the provisions of the clauses of the Local Government Act 1972 and the Public Bodies Admissions to Meeting Act 1960. An analysis which omits to mention that out of circa 1,000 written responses, 40% were in favour of all out and 60% were in favour of thirds, the opposite of what the summary declared. An analysis which gave misimpression by omitting over 450 responses on topics the summary did mention. An analysis which didn't acknowledge 27 public challenges as regards true costs of elections. An analysis which omitted any public concern or challenge as to the conduct of the consultation itself. What appears to be information hiding of Appendix B, which is the results of the survey, by publishing it at a lower level web page, whereas Appendix A was on the main page of the day, providing a misleading answer to a public question at a council meeting. And the list goes on. There are 3 more situations which I could mention. And where publication of a non-existent clause in WBC's constitution, Rule 6334D, may have led to suppression of call-in in the executive's decision in January. Please could the council explain why this pattern of conduct occurred?
Thank you for your question. I do have this answer, which I will now read out. At the meeting of the Extraordinary Council on the 22nd of June, members received an officer report on the electoral cycle, which included a range of information, including a section summarising the results of a public consultation. The detailed consultation feedback was highlighted in the report as a background document. This means that the information is available to members and the public, and in fact, the document was provided in advance of the meeting to all members and uploaded as a background document on the relevant agenda page on the Council's website. As a background document, it was dealt with in accordance with Rule 3.2.10 of the Constitution, which states that such documents will be made available for public inspection for 4 years after the date of the meeting. Notwithstanding the above, in the interest of continuous improvement, I understand the monitoring officer is reviewing what learning may be appropriate to ensure that the Council can provide the further assurance to members of the public, like yourself, that the Council does not, as you suggest, hide information, but meets its commitment of full and open transparency. Turning now to your query about the January 2022 executive meeting, I can confirm that Rule 6.3.34d does exist and states that, quote, no decision taken by the Council or due to be referred to Council for final approval, end quote, can be called in. Therefore, the decision relating to the whole Council elections made by the Executive in January, which I believe is what you are referring to, was not eligible for call-in as it was due for consideration at the February Council meeting. And can I ask, do you have a supplementary question?
Of course.
I thought you might. And why not?
This is not a concern or expression of concerns about service delivery. And it's not a complaint about a specific person's conduct or people's conduct at this time. In the content of Appendix B, there are 20 allegations of bias. There are 15 concerns as to the voting methodology, specifically voting twice. The word condescending appears, the word patronising appears, and I know I've only got a short period of time.
I was just going to say, can I ask you to?
I am happy to circulate details of this and to present my analysis to you.
That could be useful, thank you. Can we?
But if the Nolan standards are to mean anything around here, what action does the Standards Committee propose to take to improve the conduct of everybody?
Well, thank you for that. It's a very, very good supplementary question. And I would like to say that a written answer will be furnished in due course. I'm sure you know that I'm very new to this, and I think this is a very good question that needs considerable thought and attention. And I don't want to get anything wrong. So I do hope a written question will be acceptable. Thank you. Are there any more questions?
There are no member questions, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Can I ask, are there any member questions?
No.
Yeah, and we now move to the parish town council question time. Is there anybody either here or on Teams who would like to raise anything?
No questions received by the deadline, Chairman.
Not seeing anything, thank you. In that case, then we come on to item 30, the update on complaints. So I think do I now hand over to? Can I hand over to Andrew Moulton? Thank you.
So, thank you, Chair. So for new members for the committee, let me just say a little bit about this report. So that this is a standard report that the committee receives every meeting, and its main purpose is to give you information on the complaints, the member code of conduct complaints that have been received, and for you to consider any issues arising, any themes, any patterns, any training needs that you identify on the back of those complaints. So that's the first recommendation. The second recommendation is to think a little bit more holistically now around the training programme, as we're still at the beginning of a new municipal year, to think about what training members would benefit from specifically around the code of conduct itself or more general conduct issues. So that's the purpose of the report. If I can just take you through some headlines. So the committee last met in March this year, since when there's been 5 complaints received by myself as the monitoring officer. 4 of those complaints were relating to Wokingham Borough councillors, and 1 was relating to a town and parish councillor. With regard to 4 of those complaints, no further action was taken, having carefully considered the complaint. And just for members' information, for each of those complaints, I met with one of the council's independent persons to get that view from them in terms of the appropriate action to take. One complaint, though, and it's referenced TNP1, is subject to investigation. That investigation is ongoing, but it is expected to conclude shortly. And just for Imogen in particular, who was a member of this committee previously, hopefully you've noticed that we're now we're giving a reference number to each complaint. That was one of the issues that the Standards Committee identified previously in terms of finding it relatively difficult to refer to the specific complaint that I was referring to. So updates on the complaints can be found at Appendix A. I'm not proposing to go through those in detail at this stage, although obviously happy to take any questions that members would have. What I would say is you'll note that that there was a theme through these latest batch of complaints that relates to comments and exchanges on social media. And again, I would suggest that this is an area that the committee would want to focus on this year in terms of emphasising the importance of taking care on social media, given that that's an obvious pattern that we've seen during these last few months, but probably over the last 2 to 3 years in terms of complaints that have come into the council. One of the things that the committee did in the last year was set some stricter performance targets in terms of dealing with those complaints. And you'll see that on the detail of the report, which is on page 13, you'll see a couple of red complaints in terms of how quickly they were dealt with. Unfortunately, that was during the period in the run-up to the May elections and immediately afterwards, where we were fully occupied with the planning and delivery of those elections. But I will take steps to put in place some improvements for next May, so we make sure that we don't see that pattern again. On Appendix B, which is in your pack at page 14, that gives you the information with regard to the outstanding historic complaints which relate to town and parish councils. One of the questions that I'd ask for the committee is if you'd like me to take an action away with regard to looking at how we could improve the process for dealing with complaints. You'll see that those are very historic in many cases. And I think it would be helpful for the committee to think about how we can expedite in the future complaints like that and not have such historic complaints moving forwards. If I move to sort of more generally around training, as I've reported to the previous meeting, I met with representatives or town and parish clerks back in March. I'm in the process of compiling some online training for the use by towns and parishes. That should be available early in the autumn. But I would also welcome the committee's comments tonight, particularly with new members joining the committee, in terms of promoting training for councillors in the code itself. At present, I'm planning to set up a couple of online sessions with members early in the autumn, which will be a general invite to all borough councillors. I'll pause there Chair, and very happy to take any questions that members may have.
I think we have Graham and then Sam and then Adrian.
It's probably a question of my education being a newbie. I note the list of complaints and that they've been heard, but they're being heard by the officers. What appeal process is there and what involvement is there of this committee? Because otherwise we're just listening to a list of work, and I'd like to really understand our responsibilities better. I apologise that it's a juvenile question, but I think that some of us would benefit from the answer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. So in terms of the process and procedure for dealing with complaints, the committee looked at that in some detail last year. And in fact, you had an independent expert come in to talk to the committee about best practice in terms of dealing with complaints. So a lot of time was spent last year making sure that we've got good practice, if not indeed best practice, in terms of dealing with complaints. If I just talk you through the process, in my position as monitoring officer, my responsibility is to receive the complaints and make a consideration of those complaints in consultation with one of our 3 independent persons. There are various options open to me on receipt of that complaint, in terms of ranging from taking no further action because it's clear that there is no breach of the code, through to commissioning an investigation because we need more information, through to taking the complaint through a hearings panel. And it's really with that third option where a hearings panel is convened, and that would be a panel of members made up of this committee, that's where you would get actively involved in an individual complaint. What I would say is hearings panels are convened relatively rarely. We did have one in 2021, but that was the first hearings panel that we'd had probably for 2 years or so. So most of the complaints themselves get dealt with by myself as the monitoring officer in consultation with the independent person.
And then do we have Councillor Actal?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question was really just relating to, you mentioned previously there were some backlogs, and it took a bit of time to sort of go through some of these, to process some of these outstanding complaints, and just wondering, what's been done differently now to sort of help maybe speed things along a bit more.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So yes, that's right. The committee was concerned that it was taking too long to deal with complaints historically. So I've used where we need investigations, more of our legal team to actually undertake those investigations. So we brought capacity in through that process. I also have a deputy monitoring officer who again provides additional capacity to make sure that we can keep on top of complaints when they come in. Obviously, one thing that I would say is we don't know when complaints come in. We hope there won't be any complaints, but they don't necessarily come in evenly through the year. So we do need to manage that carefully, and that's one of your important roles as a committee, to provide that oversight to make sure that myself as the monitoring officer is doing an appropriate job in accordance with the procedures that you've set for me.
Thank you.
And Councillor Mazer?
Yeah, actually, Graham's question was my question as well. So it was going to be the same question. But I think you mentioned, Andrew, that there are incidents that are kept on record for quite a long time in the reporting. Perhaps you could give us a little more detail around that topic and what you think the potential ways forward with that are.
Yeah, if I understand that question correctly, you're talking about sort of themes and patterns and trends from the historic
No, not really. I'm talking about a record of the historical events.
Okay, well, what is in the public domain is the reports that I provide to this committee, like you've got tonight. So every complaint that is received, even if it's concluded that there's no breach, you will find in these quarterly reports that come to the committee. So there's that obviously public record of each complaint and how it's been dealt with. Should a complaint go to a hearings panel, those hearings panels will be held in public. So that would be a public meeting of which there would be a full record of. If a member is found to be in breach, the council would publish a decision notice in terms of that breach and what particular aspects of the code the councillor has breached. So those are the main provisions for having a public record of our code of conduct complaints.
Perhaps in terms of the social media aspects that you mentioned before and patterns, and you also interleaved that with, I think, consideration for training in the autumn. Is the training going to have this focus around social media aspects and trying to control our keyboard activities?
Yeah, it'd definitely be a focus, I think. As I say, you can see from tonight's report that there's a definite pattern there, which has been going for some time now. What I would say is in the code of conduct that the council's got, there is some good guidance, some top tips, if you like, for councillors in terms of care using social media. I think it's Appendix A in the E in the code. But again, very happy to either in this meeting or outside of the meeting to hear members' views in terms of how we can even improve that training further and that guidance that's attached to the code of conduct.
Thank you. And can I go next to Sally Gurney? Got your hand up.
Thank you. I've got a small list of questions, if that's okay. But one thing I just want to clarify for Adrian, because I don't think it was picked up, that appendix of historical stuff, that's all since our last meeting that have been things that haven't been resolved. So picking up on that one first, obviously we've got the 4 or 5, is it 5 Woodley Town Council code of conduct things where responses have either not been received due to lack of cooperation or the thing that was agreed hasn't happened. It says that they're going to be reported to for breach. Those are about 1.5 years old. What's the timeline on those ones, please?
In terms of concluding those are imminent. Okay. I would say that this month. In terms of the broader point that you make as well about the time that it is taken, one thing that I think would be helpful for the committee to consider is whether you would wish to put some additional provisions within the code itself where there is non-cooperation from members who are alleged to have breached the code, that would certainly, from my perspective, would help me deal with those complaints more expeditiously.
So that was also my next point, was to request exactly that. I think that if this committee is okay with that, I'd like us to suggest that we review some of the processes such as the timelines, so that if somebody doesn't respond, we have enough teeth that we can progress as though they have no defence they want to offer, so that we don't end up with 18 months and the complainants being stuck in limbo for 18 months, or potentially stuck in a situation where behaviour that has been complained about is ongoing and continuing for 18 months. If the committee is minded to do that, that would be lovely. So that was my second one. My third one, the training, will that also be offered to town and parish councillors?
Yes, as I said previously, I'm putting together a package at the moment that would be available to all towns and parishes.
Will we, or can we put something, or consider putting something into the code of conduct such that the training becomes required for people, not just for new councillors, but each time somebody is elected or re-elected, as well as whenever a code of conduct is a new code of conduct is released, which obviously is fairly infrequent, but I think it would be beneficial because we do have people who are re-elected many, many times who may not necessarily be refreshing their knowledge of the codes of conduct that they're agreeing to perhaps on an in-depth basis. So I think that would be something that would be advantageous. And I know the clerks have, I think, or Jan mentioned that they've requested something similar as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. And just from my perspective, I think the refresher training would be a good thing. Certainly all new councillors receive member code of conduct training at the time of their election or shortly after. But I think it would be good practice, best practice to bring in, let's say, annual refresher training for all councillors.
And then, thank you. And my last one, I promise I'm nearly done now. The last one, and we're talking about training. And I think this Woodley Town Council series of outcomes is probably indicative that it's beneficial. Can we maybe look at some kind of support for particularly chairs of town and parish committees where the borough acts as their complaints handling body, so that they can be supported for managing situations like that? I think perhaps if there are 5 code of conduct complaints over the last, not even a year's period from one town council, perhaps that might be of benefit to people to ensure that behaviours are being picked up on by chairs and the chairs know how to handle such things. Is that something that we could look at?
I'd take your steer on that as a committee. What I would say is I think we just need to think very carefully about capacity. I've obviously got responsibilities for the borough council, but also for towns and parishes. But there is only one of me, and we do need to think carefully what that support might look like that you're talking about there, Sally. But certainly, just to give you a little bit of reassurance, when I do receive complaints from towns and parishes about their councillors, I do spend a lot of time supporting the clerk concerned and helping them with the particular situation that they might face. So it's probably fair to say there is some support, but yes, there could always be more, but that's within the context of the limited capacity that we've got.
So just to clarify that, I really mean to or to find or source or provide some training for the council, the council chairs and the leaders of councils and that sort of thing, so that it's actually reducing the workload on you supporting the clerks. Because if they aren't supported by their own councillors who should be managing the behaviour with, or codes of the conduct of their own councillors, then that should hopefully help reduce the load coming through to you. It would be nice to think.
Yeah, I'll certainly take that away, and I'll pick that up with the with the clerks. I think it's a good proposal.
Thank you.
But yes, I'll take that away.
Thank you. I think that's me done for my list.
Thank you. Councillor Debate, did you want to ask something?
I just kind of want to know, with the 5 Woodley complaints, what has happened at Woodley to change their habits of obviously attacking each other. You can't tell from here whether it's one person or many persons, or what has happened to cause this problem, and what's changed within their behaviour at Woodley Town Council to stop this reoccurring.
I'm not sure I can really answer that question, Imogen, in any particular helpful way, other than what I would say is that those 5 complaints focus particularly on 2 councillors. So just to give you some indication with regard to that, and you can see in the report itself the type of conduct in meetings that the complaints were centred on. I think it's a matter for Woodley Town Council themselves in terms of what they're doing around their own councillors and the culture within that council.
Thank you, Councillor Moser.
Yeah, a similar question, Andrew. Sorry. It will be helpful, like any incognito legal arrangement if we had to have, Mr. X and Mr. Y. So I could see that, Mr. X has got 4 offences and Mr. Y has got 1 or whatever. But it's important because if we can see there's one person who's really causing a lot of aggravation in one area, then the focus of the attention needs to be quite narrow. But if it's X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then it's clear that there is a broader problem.
Yeah, I'll take that point away and think about how I can present that information. What I would say is I think the Woodley one, certainly in my experience, is very unusual. It's very unusual to have that amount of complaints in one council at the same time. And hopefully that's not something that we'll see again in the future.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Have I missed anybody? No, that's good. Thank you. Could we then move on to any other items deemed urgent? Which I don't think there are any. So does that mean we finish the meeting? So I thank you for your time. I can declare the meeting closed.